Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. In this video I will be doing an in-depth dive into the perspective at which we can see faith and poverty reflect in the governments that which the more spiritual or religious a place is, the poorer it is, the closer the people are to God, and ultimately the more conservative or right-wing in their way of living they are. In analyzing the current day and age, we see all particular eras or lives we could potentially live as humans. We can see throughout all of our modern day and age, we have the furthest advanced in technology and still the least advanced in technology. We can see this in tribes, and we can see this in Western civilization. The further you go into the tribe mentality, the more you enter a familial value. Which the further into the familial value you enter, the more into a right-wing mentality you enter. The more into a right-wing mentality you enter, the more into a spiritual experience or religious standpoint you see the world from. Where now, if we were to analyze the more technologically advanced or wealthier places in the world, the more we veer away from familial values, the more we veer away from religion or spirituality, and the more we veer into liberalism, which begs the question, based on this particular analysis, what might be what causes this particular shift? Is it the technology? Or is it the money? Where we see the shift from connecting with one particular creator to then creating another creation with another generator known as a creator. Money. And the further away we veered into the liberalism or leftist ideology, which is an idea of technological advancement, we pull away from God. We dissect God more in our science of things to measure the physical of the materialism, if you wish. And the further we went into the materialism, the more we began to see where the power struggle was. Because in understanding that if you are of a leftist leaning mind, you are essentially saying you want to empower the rich, which is why you would continue voting left at that particular point. Because if you wanted to empower the poor, you would vote for the right, giving a chance at a work where you can give yourself based on a separate opportunity. You can give yourself an equal opportunity based on a separate experience of life, based on your own particular predicament of self. You can actively dictate if you can pull out of this particular poverty, which is the path of the spirituality of this particular faith known as money. In the act of liberalism, we pull away from the familial values in order to kill God, essentially, in order to gain wealth. And the more we become greedy, the more we became able to control the rate at which this particular process would not rebalance itself. Because if we are in today's 2026 year, and we still see to this present day the eras at which man lived still 2,000 plus years ago as tribesmen, which we still see are present to this day. And then we see the further we advanced in our technological advancement, we see the further west we went and the worse and richer we became. And in the measure of money became the measure of happiness. The idea of materialism is the more money I have, the happier I will be. Because essentially man is trying to fill a void which he does not see where this emptiness is coming from. So where is the void coming from? Well, there is a moment in the transition between the right and left where we see a particular pinnacle, if you wish, that which life stems from, which is the death of the family. And the exploration entering the left, we see the death of the family, which we then see pulling away from the faith of spirituality or religion, from the faith of poverty that you may be given an equal chance based on a separate opportunity. And this is the right-wing ideal fundamental truth, which the further we go into the left, the further we see a dehumanizing aspect to life, which we are told is in order to be given more freedom. And now as a Canadian, you might see for one, wow, I actually have it pretty good. But you might also see, wow, you might have it good, but the same people that are telling you the rich are the cause of this, and so we must tax the rich. Well, what did the rich do? Well, they basically run for politics, which in their politics, they are not taxed because they control the power. And in controlling the power, you then see your celebrities in the left, which tell you vote for the left, which these celebrities themselves are very wealthy based on the fact that they can control people that vote for the left. And the idea that if you are controlled into voting for the left, well then basically you might as well just be giving up at that particular point. And then the idea of all eras of mankind being present in one particular day and age, if we were truly to look at it from the standpoint that everybody from a separate opportunity of life, known as a different life experience in individual selves, if we were to look at it from the perspective of based on the opportunity of the separate life experience, you are then given an equal opportunity to succeed if you choose you want to succeed. This is where you then see your mind enter a right-wing like mentality, where you could see an erasing of all poverty throughout the world all of a sudden, because the people of poverty want to arise out of it. And the people in technological advanced countries, such as Western countries, that believe in the freedom and liberation of the poor in order to, say, get rid of the rich. The same people that are voting for the freedom of liberation are essentially voting for the impoverishment of the rest of the world so that they may withhold that particular wealth to that nation rather than to the rest of the world. So to what degree does leftist ideology essentially take over and impoverish or enslave the world? Well, let's look at the banking system. Where do you own your money to? The bank. And if you own a bank, at which rate can you control people paying you back? Why are nations in debt? If they had a banking system that ran its money, circulating it back into its own economy, technically you shouldn't be able to generate debt at that point as a country, because the wealth would be continuously circulating back into the economy. The problem now is the bank created a complex which we began believing, in order for us to achieve more, I need more of a paper, which then turned into I need more of a digital number, which we then saw in the rise of the digital ID, which became the fourth dimension of our experience as humans, which you can control based on one experience all other previous dimensions of existence, resulting in what overall makes your health. If you shut down a person's financial aspect, or a physical aspect, or a mental aspect, or a spiritual aspect, you see that eventually all other structures of what makes health shut down the same. And we are enslaving people according to digital numbers. There's no actual physical value behind what we are generating the debt number with. So ultimately, we are enslaving nations in exchange for a digital computer number. That's all that value is in terms of the debt that which nations owe money to. And so how do you say enslave a nation? You create a complex to make it believe that in order to grow, you must first borrow. Why? How would borrowing make me have a better opportunity at growing? Because I can acquire the same through working, which through working we can all actively say in a patience of understanding, debt is your savings of tomorrow being spent today. Which the more you can finance or create a way a person spends their savings for the future to get them to spend it today, you then see you can create a system where you can essentially make money based on creating a way to finance a person's savings away from themselves, based on the greed of a person. In the psychology of the banking system, you can actively see you can manipulate people into wanting the shiny thing, which is that brand new toy, in order to essentially see that the rate at which I can enslave you to essentially now in our modern day and age a digital number by adding portions of your income that which I take away from you in order for you to acquire something you would in the future, you would acquire it today in exchange for a digital number. You are now my property. And this is where the complex of the banking system became. They essentially took property over humanity. And we are now here in the present day and age, realizing that in the physical world of the earth, we see all different eras or lifestyles man has existed within, from the very poor tribesmen to the very rich Western civilization. And in the idea that in order to get rid of the poor, we have to vote for the left, which we will then tax the rich. But the rich are the ones in power. And they have generated a way to unionize the belief that this is where you will be empowered in your victimhood. Which now, when you look at a union, no matter how hard I work, no matter how little I work, no matter how on time I work, no matter how late I am to work, and no matter how poor my attitude or how good my attitude is, the overall pay doesn't change in the union. The position is the same whether you are brand new or far experienced. The only change is in the attitude at which you see you are truly succeeding, which is a false hope. You might have it pretty good here, but in the overall system, there is a glitch, if you wish. And in the idea of finding the virus that causes glitch, well, then we must analyze the financial dimension, which now as a world you can actively awaken to realizing that you are somebody's property. Now imagine, for example, if out of this debt, every Canadian now went to a debt insolvency agency and said, we would all like to declare bankruptcy because we owe you money based on digital money, which doesn't hold a physical value, and we have been enslaving ourselves for over 25 years to pay back a digital or paper, that which you just typed or printed without adding a physical value in exchange for that particular paper or digital ID number. And what the value was the property you acquired. The problem is that a fair trade? For, say, 525,000 pieces of paper, I now get to own a house, which I will finance back in the overall rate at, say, now the 8% of the finance in the overall after the first initial term of the financing back of the mortgage. In the financing back of the initial mortgage, you would then see that after 25 years, if you did not enter a second term, you would have financed back for that particular bank 1.25 million pieces of paper in exchange for them giving you that house today. Now, in the value of paper, I don't know about you, but I can fold it pretty quick. Which means I can burn it, I can rip it, I can do whatever I want with it. It holds zero value to me because it's that easily malleable. And the more easily malleable the money became, the more easily we could see people did not have a value to holding on to it as a saving. And we saw them experience what is known as greed, Because the more we could generate a meaningless money, the more I could acquire infinite meaningless things. And in the understanding that the further back we drive the value of fundamental true wealth, which was initially backed by gold or silver, which was of a fundamental value, which was of a rare property. And because of its rarity, it held a value, which means the more of this value you held, the more wealthy you were, the more you could acquire based on the more you would save. And in the idea of saving, what is a savior? An individual that creates a way of understanding the way savings work. Now, forget me outside of that. Let's talk into the idea of the banking system here. When you look at the banking system, which is now of a digital property, which in exchange for a banker just simply going, tack, 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 you own this now, but in exchange, you will then have to pay us back, tack, 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 this much. Thank you for doing business. Please come again. And in this business model, we see they could essentially take over the entire world based on generating a system based on a meaningless value that drove a meaningless value or experience behind what is known as the human experience. And in this depth of the psychological analysis behind this particular model, we then see where the true sickness truly lies, in the complex of the new creator or the new God we saw as money. But apart from that, here's a new God for you. It's called the internet, which every day people are praying, sitting in front of the internet, where you may achieve everything that consciousness may achieve on its own, simply being taught by a digital self. Thank you.